tonight's artist, we are having the discussion whether it is his musicianship or whether it's the ECM label. The reason he shook the world and is at number 32. This week's artist, Jan Garbarek, the Jan Garbarek Quartet, and the album is Afric Pepperbird from 1970. So, welcome back to the Unconnoisseur. My name's Matt. You see the other two Yahoos on the screen as well. Dad, how was your week in music?
Well, I tell you, I didn't get a much listen to the album itself, though I did early this in the week, and then I put it aside and I was listening to some other music. Last Tuesday evening, Mom and I went to the 45th annual Fort Wayne area community band performance.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there roughly 2 hours. There's over 100 musicians in the band. Now, I will tell you that some of those folks have been with the group for all of the 45 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of white hairs, a lot of bald-headed folks, and there's a spattering of younger people who played in the band. And I'll tell you, they had a mezzo soprano who sang nearly all of the pieces from The Sound of Music with the band in the background. And it just blew us away. And she's a local gal, and it blew us away. It was so fantastic. Her voice and the range of her voice and the climb every mountain. She hit it. She was impeccable.
That's good.
That's can I say one more thing? Friday night, typically we watch Hawaii Five-0. And I thought, I wonder what Hawaiian jazz would sound like. So I listened to some Hawaiian jazz this week. I'm sure I wrote some of it down, but there was one piece I couldn't retrace who this artist was, but I want to find it and recommend this to our followers. So that's part of where I'm coming from.
Nice.
Did it have the flavor of pineapple on it?
No, ukulele.
Ukulele, yeah.
Ukulele.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm trying to remember if I've ever heard any Hawaiian jazz. I know I've heard a lot of ukulele.
Oh yeah.
But Hawaiian jazz, huh? That's full West Coast, right? Full West Coast jazz.
Full West Coast jazz, baby. It has the silence and the space in it.
To let it breathe.
Let it breathe.
Yep. Let it breathe. That's right.
Let the pineapples grow, baby. Let them grow.
Matt, what about your week?
Oh, well, besides Jan Garbarek, in my ear this week, I had just a plethora of other music, and I have a list of albums from Jan that I listened to. But today, Jan plays on the Homage Eberhard Weber album, and that's from 2015. Now, the Homage album is, and if you've never heard Eberhard, he's a fretless bass player, and we've talked about a fretless bass player on our episodes before. Eberhard has a different sound to his bass, and I love his sound. It's the Jan Garbarek kind of haunting, eerie, mystic sound from his bass. My man Pat Metheny plays on the album. Our friend Gary Burton plays on the album too. So it's an easy album to listen to. But oh man, I just had a plethora because Jan. And we'll get into the discussion in a little bit, but Jan has been on more sidemen than he does actual albums out. So it's fun to listen to Jan Garbarek as a sideman on all of these other albums besides his own. So a lot of jazz music in my ear. You know, again, we were sitting out under the pergola just a few minutes ago, and Kendra asked me about the artist that will be coming out for you guys next week, and so I had some of that on, and I had some Jan on for her. So, yeah, it's funny because even yesterday for Mother's Day, we were all sitting out under the pergola, and I had some smooth jazz on, and Mom looks at me and she said, "Man, that's nice. That's nice music." Well, of course it is. I'm not going to play some ratchet jazz for you on Mother's Day. I want something nice. So, happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there too. Late.
Yeah, you broke out the good china for that one.
Of course. I did.
So the bass player is that electric bass?
Yes.
Stand
Yeah.
up?
Eberhard Weber plays the electronic bass.
Yeah.
The electric bass. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's fretless, much like
Jocko.
Jocko. Yep. Pastorius. He's got a different sound than Jocko though, and it's much more mellow. Jocko's an upbeat, all crazy and all over the stage, and I picture Eberhard as more eerie and haunting sound than Waylon. All right, Drew, tell me about your week.
Well, whatever you do, do it to jazz, right? I had the great opportunity and pleasure yesterday now on Mother's Day to stand with the New School Music Austin Sunday Night Jazz Ensemble and perform at Central Market. We had a 30-minute window to get up and perform. It was a full day of jazz music with the Austin Independent School Districts coming out to display. They had 40-minute sets for the jazz bands, and they lasted from 10:30 to 5 o'clock. We got to hear McCallum right before us. Then we had Bowie High School shortly after that and Lamar Middle School. I got to be honest, man, those middle schoolers, I think they had probably the best set that I got to hear. They were killing it. It was super great. We had a super short set, and it was a fun set. It was a super good time to get on stage with my daughter and play jazz music.
Yeah.
So it was a super great day. It was 78 degrees here, breezy, beautiful skies. So we had an epic day for being outside.
Now, I know that you said you were worried about your solo. How did your solo go?
I'm 2 years on a trumpet, solo.
Nice.
It went well.
Good.
It was on summertime, so I'd been working on writing one out just so that I could hear it, record it, and play it. And then the second chorus was just freestyle, and I knew what I wanted to play. I've practiced it. Just I played the notes. A couple of them I didn't get right because I wanted to play a little bit higher. But hey, it was fun. I knew what to do when I didn't get to that note. I had a feeling that standing out there, you get horrified when you take a look around at the crowd and there's 100 people, strangers, standing there watching. So I did watch a couple of things, but then I got knuckles and kudos from the lead trumpet player. So
Nice.
he was pleased with me just giving it my all. And I've been so blessed to play with those young folks because we've got middle school, early high school, and the set included many of our vocal songs. And we have a singer that should be out on tour with somebody. She's just got a beautiful voice. She's learning now how to control the band, which is super fun to see her take a leadership role like that. So we're fortunate to have such a great Sunday night. That leads me to this. I took off my button down and showed the big tent. You know, anything that I wear is tent size. So my billboard was out with the Texas Jazz and Blues coming up. Texas Jazz and Blues Camp, June 15th through the 20th at St. Stephen's School here in Austin, Texas. It's a week of great music, and it will actually wrap up with the performance of Mr. Bill Evans, saxophonist who had played with Miles. He'll do a show at Monk's on Friday night, and he's doing a show for the camp on Thursday night. It's going to be a great week of jazz music, June 15th through the 20th.
Nice. I like it.
What about Monks? Were you at Monks this week?
Oh, man, I completely forgot about Milo. Milo Himsoth on Thursday night was doing his quintet. They were playing the music, not to be confused with the other Bill Evans, but the pianist Bill Evans. Lily and I were there. What a great show to go see. Milo has been our intern helping the students on Sunday nights, so it was a super great time just to go support one of our own Sunday nighters. So Milo Himsoth, Thursday night at Monk's, and a super great show. Super great musicians, but that's what you expect at Monk's.
We have not covered Bill Evans yet, the piano player.
Are we going to see him?
Maybe. I don't know. He may be on the list. You'll have to tune in to find out.
Good deal. Well, how about this? You want to get to these clips for Mr. Jan Garbarek, Afric Pepperbird, or do you want to get to the slideshow?
I think we should do the clips first. That way, it gives our listeners a little taste of what Jan's all about.
All right.
Well, I'll start with Consentus and play the whole piece, the whole track.
All
Yes.
right.
You're getting greedy, you know it.
Oh, he is.
Kidding. I've been there.
Consentus. We'll play the whole song just
Yeah.
for you, Dad.
That's it. That's the whole song.
50 seconds.
Yeah.
50 seconds.
I had to make sure to shut that off because it was going to get wild next. 50-second song. Well, why this choice?
Well, part of the reason is because the mellow sound, the tone, the richness, smooth, calming, melodic. I just felt I felt a peacefulness as I listened to that. So that track moved me in a very positive way.
In my notes that I made last year when we listened to the album for Consentus, I put nice and lullaby like.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of a nice break between the first 4 songs and the last 3 songs where in my clip, can I go next?
Yeah.
You'll hear, I'm asking the producer over there. You'll hear in my clip, it's a little louder and raucouser, so more raucous. But again,
Dad's clip, and I'll say this again later, but it really does when we get into the album. That to me is ECM, and there are some words to define what ECM was looking for their future records. You wanted to hear which track though?
I'm going to do the title track, Afric Pepperbird. Start me right at 2 minutes and give me about 30 to 35 seconds.
3,
So
2, 1.
You'll see in the slideshow coming up that the genre that I have listed for Jan is avant-garde, and just so our listeners know, Jan Garbarek is a saxophone player. So the clip that I picked kind of highlighted him on the tenor sax in that particular section, but it also highlighted the percussion section. So Jan Christensen on percussion there, playing with Jan. Kind of wailing on the tenor sax on that song. So the avant-garde, I can really hear the avant-garde coming through on that. It's not quite pushing the free jazz limit, but man, the avant-garde is definitely there. So
the interesting part is that y'all both picked, and I kind of did this on purpose, I thought y'all might pick some of the easier segments of this. The entire album is filled with moments of breathing like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the in-betweens that build the tension. And I think to me that's that free jazz style coming out, which is why I always wondered, should it just be a free jazz album? And is ECM promoting free jazz in this style? But it wasn't the free jazz. And that's what hit me the most. So I want to play this clip and talk a little bit about it after that. I want to hear Beast of Komodo. And I'm choosing a moment that is at 2:38. I'll talk about it once it's played. It went from smooth to Beast of Komodo. When I hear or heard that over and over again, I've listened to the album probably 3 times today. Just like Ascension, there's this yelling, there's this vocalizing, there's this rush of emotion coming through the horn. And we've talked, Matt, you and I have talked about it in the past, how you feel after a great set of racquetball, how I feel after a good bike ride. This, not exhaustion, but this mental release. That's not just a physical, it's a mental release. And that's what that clip reminded me of. Now, every time I've listened to Beast of Komodo, I go back to the idea that this was about the Nordic sounds. It was almost the folk tales of this Nordic region. It wasn't just European jazz, it was Nordic jazz. And so listening to the entire album, you start to understand that release right there. Everything else was chill, relaxed, and then you get to this moment with the overblowing, with the reverberation of the horn itself, and that's that release. That's why I wanted to hear that particular song. I have about 5 other places in that song that really highlight that, but we're not going to listen to the 17-minute track.
It's a great clip, though. I mean, all 3 of our clips were different enough to where it gives our listeners a chance to experience not the whole album, but different parts of the whole album. So, yeah, because we each highlighted something just a little bit differently.
And that's where I would say this as we get ready to kick off the slideshow. For new listeners, Afric Pepperbird might sound rougher than most everything you'll ever hear out of ECM. But that's what makes it so important. It's messy, brilliant beginning of decades-long journey for Jan and for many other artists. And so it was a launching point.
Well, since you brought it up, ECM had only been a jazz label for 1 year when they recorded this album. So I can picture Manfred kind of drooling at the chance to work with Jan and not knowing his exact direction where he's going as far as a label goes. Yep. And thankfully he was able to reel it in enough to where, like you said, Jan here on this album is a little more experimental avant-garde than the rest of the ECM label tends to be.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying he took the spaghetti and threw it against the wall to see if it would stick, but I'm not sure he had his vision for 30 years down the road or 50 years down the road, what ECM was going to be yet.
But more history on that album coming in just a moment.
Yes.
Because
yes,
it maybe was the spaghetti on the wall. I love that idea though.
Yeah, for sure.
That's cool.
For sure. All right, Drew, bring up the first slide. We'll get through the slideshow quick. Whatever you do it to jazz. You can hear by our weeks in music that's pretty much what we do 24/7 for me anyways. Again, tonight we're talking about Jan Garbarek. The album is Afric Pepperbird. The cover art is there on the bottom right hand corner of the slide. If you didn't know any better, and there was no words on it, you could totally tell it was an ECM record cover.
Checks the box, doesn't it?
Checks the box for ECM. So I love it. I do. I love it.
Is that a pillow or some kind of upholstery or something?
I think it may be a bed sheet or maybe a parachute material. I don't know. That's a good question though. Cool. Let's move on to the next slide. Jazz lingo for the day. I love this. I get so much fun picking the jazz lingo for the day. This week, the term we're going to talk about, screwing the pooch. And that's when you make a really bad mistake while playing music. And I did not talk about this in my week of music this week, but I was in the studio with Lady D this past Saturday. I was laying down a trumpet track for her, and I screwed the pooch several times while I was recording. So,
wait a minute. You're in the studio recording trumpet?
Uh-huh.
Did I hear that right?
You did.
Come on, man. Tell us about it. Come on. Don't be humble.
She's producing an album for a friend of hers, and the friend is the musical director for the album, and she was diddling around on the piano with the trumpet sounds. There's in the particular section of the song, her lyrics are, "When I walk into the room, I want the trumpets to sound for you." And she wrote this really cool trumpet part, but Delaney, Lady D, said that she wanted a real trumpet to record it instead of the MIDI trumpet sounds. So Saturday I went over and I spent about an hour and a half with the horn to my lips for first time in 20 years maybe. It was fun. Anyways, I did get to lay down some tracks, and if the artist likes the recording, then she'll use the recording. Otherwise, they're going to stick with the MIDI. But I told Delaney to keep it in a range for me, and there was a few notes that were out of my range that I had to bring down the octave. But otherwise, my teeth and my lips were very, very sore when I got home. It's if for those of you who are not musicians, your chops, your lips are like muscles. If you don't use them, they tend to get weak. And without practicing, yes, I still can play. I couldn't go out and march a 5-mile parade. I couldn't play.
That's because you're old, not because
I couldn't play a 2-hour concert band concert. But for what she needed, I was able to warm up a little bit. I forgot to take valve oil with me, so I had to use some canola oil. Hey, it worked. It worked enough to get me by, but don't tell anybody I ever did that, because
everybody knows now.
The trumpet players out there are they're coming through the screen at me. But anyways, my lingo for the day, I screwed the pooch a couple of times and had to re-record anyways while I was recording. It was fun.
Good.
So I'm glad to hear you say it was fun. How otherwise would you describe it? The experience of going back to your history as a musician, a professional.
If it was with anybody else besides Lady D, I would have considered it work. But because it was Lady D, she was so generous. I had to practice. I had a headset on so I could hear the trumpet part that was written, and all I had to do was kind of match the trumpet part that was written. I had sheet music up on the screen so I could play the part. And if it would have been anybody else besides Lady D, I would have been embarrassed. But I kept thinking, we get to hear the gold at the end of the rainbow every week, and the musicians are professional. They're spot on every week. Now, I did make some mistakes that she said, "Don't worry about it. I recorded it 4 different times. You missed that note here, but you got it right on the second take. So I'll just take that note on the second take and mix it all together and make you sound." And I'm not really highlighted besides it's just a few measures right after the lyrics. So the rest of the stuff that I did will be mixed, way down. It's different when you hear it loud in your ears as opposed to when you hear the whole piece done together. So yeah, maybe I'll get my name on a record. I don't know. It was a favor to Lady D, because anytime I can do her a favor, I'm happy. But like I said, it was fun. And had it been anybody else but Lady D, I would have turned it down or been embarrassed the whole time. But
Man, I had a gig and Matt gets recorded.
Yeah.
I just got out Whataburgered.
no, that's not. I wasn't trying to out Whataburger you. I was just. I was using my lingo for the day to say I screwed the pooch a couple of times.
That's awesome.
All right, let's get back.
Yeah.
We get back to the slideshow, where you can get it. You can find this week's album on all of the major music streaming platforms. I did check Discogs again. There's 122 copies for sale on Discogs if you want to own the music and have it in your collection. There's 122 CDs. There's at least 100 LPs for sale of Afric Pepperbird. Put a quote at the bottom of that slide. Sometimes it works, sometimes it fails. But that's what we face when we're dealing with improv. And that's a quote by Jan Garbarek. And not just improv, but even when you're reading music, sometimes it works and sometimes it fails.
Right.
I did in the studio. But I thought it was a great quote from Jan. He seems like an intelligent, down-to-earth kind of guy about his music. So I just wanted to highlight that quote from Jan.
Bingo.
Okay, let's move on to the timeline slide. Jan was born in 1947, and his first album that he released came in 1967. So that makes him 20 years old when he released his first album, which, in my opinion, is young, but he's professional enough to cut an album. So, man, 20 years old, cutting his first album. What a great deal. 1970, this album is released. And then in 1973, Jan made the decision to give up the avant-garde kind of sound of his jazz and went a completely different way. So any album that you hear after 1973 from Jan is going to have that Nordic kind of folky, eerie, haunting sound after 1973. So the reason I highlighted that is because he's got the avant-garde section and then the post-avant-garde where he just switched completely. So I kind of fell in love with that little fact. In 1994, his biggest release and one of ECM's largest best-selling albums, called Officium, was released. And Officium, if you've ever heard Gregorian chant, Officium is Jan Garbarek and the I knew I was going to forget the choir. There's a choir behind him singing Gregorian chant, and the album is simply amazing. I listened to it a couple of times this week while I was working and doing the slideshow, and so if you have not heard Officium by Jan Garbarek, go ahead and check that album out.
Nice.
Let's move on to the next slide. The influences that I found, or at least some of them that I found, of course, we've talked about the Scandinavian folk melodies. Drew, you mentioned that earlier during the clips, that you could really hear the Scandinavian kind of influence. And then Albert Ayler, who we have not covered yet, but coming up in a few weeks, we may hear about Albert Ayler. So you get to hear some of Albert Ayler's music and realize where Jan got some of his influence. He's got 34 studio CDs and 46. I made the mistake, and it says live, but it's Sideman's CDs, 46 as Sideman. The genre that I've got listed is jazz, classical, and world music. And, because of that Scandinavian influence, you can kind of consider his music world music as well. A few facts about Jan. He was born in Norway and grew up in Oslo. He got his start by working with none other than George Russell. And you guys remember George Russell, New York, New York, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Think you can lick it? Buy you a ticket.
Get your wicked.
get you a wicket. Come to the wicket. He was not. Jan Garbarek was not on that New York album, but he did work a lot with George Russell. He also worked with Drew, your man Keith Jarrett.
Yeah.
So he worked a lot with Keith. And those are just a few of the people that he worked with, the bigger names that he's worked with that at least stood out to me.
And I don't see it on here. Actually, I'll pause. I'll let you continue.
Okay, feel free to take over.
Now, you mentioned Keith Jarrett, so I have to go there.
Okay.
ECM recorded this album and immediately sent it to Keith Jarrett. Said, this is the direction we're going. And I had a note in here, the same thing happened with Jan Johansson. ECM, Manfred Eicher, traveled to record these particular albums. And because of that, he was hungry to get these recorded for sure. But he recorded this and then sent it to Keith Jarrett. So from that day forward, Keith Jarrett and Jan Garbarek had a very good working relationship and personal relationship. So that Keith Jarrett story is just as deep coming up a couple years when Manfred travels again for another album. So I just wanted to interject that bit of their personal time, Keith and Garbarek.
Yeah, no, that's great. Jan did kind of pioneer the ambient jazz genre where, I hate to say jazz in the background, but ambient, you don't really have to focus too much on it. You can let it play, come in and out of your focus as you kind of wish. Now, obviously, Afric Pepperbird is not an ambient jazz album. It's on the avant-garde side, but still, it's fun to know that he's kind of one of the pioneers for ambient jazz. He was nominated for a Grammy in 2005 for his album In Paradise of Dreams. Now, that's another one. I kind of got lost in that album. He released it in 2004, and I've probably listened to that, and I kid you not, 20 times if I've listened to it once. It is such an amazing album, In Praise of Dreams. Let's talk about Afric Pepperbird for a minute. It was recorded over 2 days, and this, again, is Jan's first ECM album, like I highlighted earlier. It's also one of Jan's strongest and most aggressive albums in his career for ECM. The album that I talked about earlier, the
In Praise of Dreams.
No, the Officium was actually released on a different label. Was released on a different label. Sorry. This album was recorded in a hotel room that was next to an elevator. Drew, tell the story.
Well, I'm not sure where to go with that. When you're recording next to an elevator and you've got to stop the recording just to let the elevator go, it took us right back to the train coming into Jeanette Recording Studio.
Yep.
Every time that train came in, they had to get the record cut and be done with it, or it was going to cause major issues while recording. This is what led us to really dig in to ECM as the label. They've done a lot of live recordings early on, so they were on locations. They were hungry to record this new sound or idea of jazz. It reminded me of Fred Jeanette, just going after everything that he could get his hands on.
Yeah.
So
and it is highlighted in the magazine on the paragraph about Jan Garbarek that every time the building lift was used, they had to stop recording because of sound leakage. So I can't imagine, me picturing myself in the studio. I had full concentration on the music and what Lady D was doing, what I was doing. Man, I can't imagine being in the middle of a tune and Manfred saying, "Cut, we got to stop. Here comes the elevator."
Especially some of these 17-minute songs.
Correct. So either you had to time it right to where you could get that 17-minute recording without stopping, or start. What do you do? So I just love the story. It brings back the great memories that I had talking to you about this last year and realizing why the album shook the world.
Yep.
So on the 99 list, Afric Pepperbird was number 44. And on the 06 list, it made it to number 33. And of course, this year on the 2022 list, it made it to number 32. Once again, we are using the Jazzwise magazine's top 100 albums that shook the world from 2022. So it moved up 1 degree in the list to number 32.
Nice.
Phew, excuse me. Okay, so on our 6 degrees of separation, I got Jan Garbarek, who played with George Russell, as we highlighted earlier in the episode, and of course George Russell and Miles Davis played together. I could have also used Keith Jarrett in there because we talked about, and it's right there on the few facts slide, that he worked a lot with Keith Jarrett, and of course Keith and Miles together. Let's move on to the final slide for me in the slideshow. Today in jazz history. Today, May the 21st. The bassist Christian McBride was born in 1972. And if you've never heard Christian, man, go check out some of Christian McBride's music because it is amazing. My man Fats Waller was born in 1904. And of course, Fats is a piano player. We have not covered Fats Waller, but we've talked about him in several of our episodes. Yeah. And then the trumpet player Kenny Durham records But Beautiful in 1957. And I highlighted the word beautiful instead of the word but beautiful.
But
one final quote for me. You've got to react to what's around you in the moment, whatever the music is. Just think of it as someplace you have to enter and you need to find the key. You need to find the key to unlock what's going on so that you can enter the moment for the music.
I'm pondering that very statement. I kind of got lost in those words.
Mm-hmm. Well, think about your solo. Think about your solo on Summertime on Sunday when you were playing.
Yeah.
You had to get to a place where you either felt comfortable or felt like I mean, it's my turn. I got to do it. And you just have to find that key to unlock that section of your brain to think, here we go.
I was singing the lyrics in the back of my head to Summertime, and looking around, it was like, it makes sense. What place is this? How do you react with this environment? How are you going to react if you screw up? Those quick seconds that go through your head, and you go, you know what? I found my rhythm here. Yeah. I can't look down at my music. I just need to play what I'm feeling.
Right.
And you hear the song in the back of your head, and you go, cool, I'm going to do this.
Right. Yeah, that's what the whole quote, and that's what the whole quote's about. Just find that key, unlock that, and then just get right on. There. Yep. All right, Dad, what's new?
Okay, what's new? Brandy Younger is a harpist, and her album is Brand New Life, and it was released in 2023. And when I first opened the album, I was captivated. I had never considered a harpsichord, a harp associated with jazz. But when I listened to her album, Brand New Life, I was just captured. I wanted to hear more and more and more of her work. And what I found in history was in her early career, she worked with Pharoah Sanders. She worked with Robbie Coltrane, Jack DeJohnette, Common, John Legend, The Roots, and Laura Hill. Now, I don't know about some of those other artists. She helped redefine the role of the harp in contemporary jazz, hip hop, and popular music. And I truly would recommend our listeners go and listen to some of her music. And like she made her debut in 2007 as a graduate student at New York University. When she was with Robbie Coltrane, who enlisted her at 23 years old to participate in the memorial service for her Robbie's mother, Alice. So she has some connections.
Yep.
And the fact that in 2007, she finally was basically came out as a jazz artist. and she's got a great background. And any of her work is just so fantastic. So I truly recommend this artist. It's a tribute to the harpist Dorothy Ashby. While continuing to push the instrument forward, this album won a 2024 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Jazz Album.
Wow.
So, and also, man, I wish I would have seen earlier that she's going to be in Bloomington on the 23rd of this month.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked, the prices, like for mature adults, it's like $40.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
No, that $40 is like, it's like nothing. Go to play. It'd be very, very much worth the $40. I think in the next tickets are only like $50 or $60, something like that. Very reasonable to me.
Cool.
So if you like this is harp like you've not heard before.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to listen to the album at all, Drew?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. I personally, I had Courtney Pine pictured his style of music going through listening to the album. I could hear some Courtney Pine influence in there. What did you think?
I can see that. Yeah. I could definitely see that.
The way that she uses the background percussion and beats kind of reminded me of Courtney Pine.
So you guys would recommend our listeners listening to this new album?
Well, it took me about 2 minutes before I texted you back. What did I text you?
Yeah.
I've got a second favorite jazz instrument now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah.
All right. So that wraps up our slideshow. Let's get into some discussion about Jan Garbarek's Afric Pepperbird.
Okay. Let's do it. You know, this album was pretty critically acclaimed. The Penguin Guide to Jazz gave this album a 4.5 out of 5 stars. All Music gave it a 4 out of 4 stars. You pulled up some information this week, Drew. Let's hear your talking points about Jan.
Well, about the album in general, some of the things, I don't need my notes for this because I geeked out on it enough. I've read it all. Some of the things that really began to shake the world up here, it's Jan Garbarek. He is coming at this with the Nordic sounds. He's coming at it with this folk music of his era and location. What he decided to do was just free play, free within a form. And what he wanted to do is reflect some of those sounds. They came out with ECM. Eicher came in and then said, this is the direction of ECM. The idea became what ECM was known for and what their aesthetic as music is. We can hear that when we talk about any ECM artist. Some of those notes, and I would say this, characterized ECM's label. Jan's perspective, transparent, spacious, and intimate sound.
Mm-hmm.
Often described as having a silent sound. Letting it breathe is what you said. The silence and space within its music, and it's a sound of both rich overtones and attuned to individual sounds of each performer. The particular album here that we're listening to, they played with each other so well as musicians that they kind of you can almost imagine the look when they go, yeah, he's going to do that. Oh man, he's going to do that. Oh, he went there. And then they all just take a breath and then continue playing. ECM's aesthetic became key with this album. The space and the silence, the intimacy. ECM does have some European classical influences to it, and it highlights minimal approach. And I think that's the kind of the sound that we start to see with ECM as it pertains to this album. There is the freedom to play the music that you want to play, even if it does move to free jazz. But there's also this moment when you hear an album like this and go, why is it the music? or is it the record label, or is it both? And for them to send this album, Manfred Eicher to send it over to Keith Jarrett and go, this is the future. This is what we want. This is what we need. It was a selling tool to get Keith Jarrett to sign with the label. And then a couple of years after this album, of course, the Cone concert comes out, and they dragged their recording equipment to record that live performance, solo pianist performance. So I think Manfred took a big risk in these early days to create an aesthetic that became ECM record label. That's what I was really listening in for. It's them. It was a Europeanist style. It was this Nordic style of jazz. It was the 7th ECM album ever, and it was a big impact in music. It was a big impact for us. I mean, we get to enjoy this record from how many years ago? 1970. You were born, I wasn't. Dad was in his 20s.
That caught me by surprise.
So I think there was a lot about this particular album that really did shake the world just from that standpoint.
The other quote that I highlighted in the magazine paragraph, many commentators say that it was with this record that Eicher came into his own as a producer. After we recorded it, he said, we knew we had something special.
Yes.
So even Manfred, kind of the light bulb went off for him and said, wow, we've got it. This is the direction we want to go.
Yep. And they did.
Mm-hmm.
And he stayed true to that, even still to today. And I think about ECM today when you did your where you can find it at. ECM was one of the first labels just to dump their stuff on the internet. We know that you're coming here to listen to the music. We know that we've got the music, so let the listeners have it. And so they put their entire catalog out. Now, that's a big deal for a record label, just to put it out there. But again, going to the musicianship, why did they create the music? And Winton was addressed with this. Is the music for the people, or is the music for the musician? Well, as a musician, I want to create it for you to enjoy it. Without me, you don't get to enjoy it, and without you, I don't get to perform it. So this works hand in hand, and ECM still shaking the world up.
Well, and I remember our discussion a year ago when we talked about it. You had to re-enlighten me that it was more about ECM and the start of the label than it necessarily was about Jan. Because I think one of the comments that I said was, I didn't really care for the album that much at first, but man,
No.
after our discussion, my rating just kind of shot through the roof.
Yep.
Shot.
It is
through the roof.
interesting, though, because I looked at my notes again from yesteryears and realized I listened to a lot of Jan's work. This is a very rare piece for him to have that kind of screaming, like the Beast of Komodo. You don't hear that free jazz in there. And then you look at the other artists and who they've performed with. I mean, we've got, I don't have it in front of me, one of them that performed with Don Cherry. And by the way, I'm not going to try to say their names because they're they're Scandinavian names, and I don't want to slaughter it for their reasons, but I'll put their names up below me here. One of them performed with Don Cherry, who I love and admire. There was another that Albert Eiler. Most of them had performed with so many other great musicians of the time that their list is long. One of them, I noticed the
and
bass.
those musicians happen to be free jazz artists.
Yes. So they play with that. But one of the other notes that I made in here, and my tablet's sitting over there now. Most of them played with several other artists. One of them ended up on an album that we loved, Thomas Stanko's, the tribute to Christoph Komeda. And two of them were on that album. And so when you think about Thomas Stanko, you think about this European pocket. We're not talking about English. We're not talking about the Tubby Hayes style music. We're talking about this true Nordic European sound. Those guys had a very unique. We talked about Jan Johansson and the stories that unfold, where they recorded, when they recorded, and
Esbjorn Svensson. I mean,
come on.
I know it's that whole Nordic kind of. I hate to say easy listening, but
But you've said it. I don't want to call it background music, but it's easy.
But it's easy.
You turn it on and you just know, like the ECM aesthetic that I just read off, there's silence in there.
Yep.
There's a moment when everything breathes. There's nothing hurried. You're not feeling like, even with the Beast of Komodo, you're not feeling like it's this rushed, heavy, free jazz, Peter Brotzman style music. It's this chilled, relaxed, have a glass of wine.
It gives you a chance to breathe, though, because there are those moments of relief, like Dad's clip, where you get a chance to refresh and say, okay, what's next?
Yes.
Dad, what was your take?
Well, quite different from your own, because I found it, even at first, I found it difficult to listen to the Afric Pepperbird and the Komodo. It just didn't. It was, to me, it was not soothing. I couldn't follow the flow of it. It was, to me, it was free, very free, which I'm not. Obviously, I'm an unconnoisseur, and even a less than a connoisseur of that style of music. So that's my impression. Even Secreta, is that the last piece? Even that didn't move me into listening to it over and over again. Listening to it a couple times, which I did. I didn't feel much peace about it. I didn't feel the calm. You guys obviously are much deeper as unconnoisseurs as you are, but you're becoming much more connoisseurs, and so you can read into it. You can hear what I don't hear, and you can interpret what's there that I have no ear for. The only music I can play is a rough drumstick,
Well, and I think that's the interesting part about having your input on this, though, because when we really break this down, it's taken us a little over 2 years to even have a kind word to say about free jazz, if you will, or vocal jazz. But each time we go back to these albums, you pick up a little something different about how it makes you feel. And so that idea, that feeling that you've got is so valid, because I think that's the true raw emotion of how we felt, which is what led us to this discussion, Dad. Why is this album on the list? What the heck is this all about? And I think it was so funny when you look back and go, maybe it wasn't necessarily the musicianship. Maybe there was some other reason why it made it to the top 100. And I forget about this all the time, Matt. When we opened this magazine, and I was asked this question early on, is it the highest selling albums? Is it the best known? It's not a list of favorite recordings, biggest sellers, or the most collectible titles from jazz's first century of recorded music. But this magazine, this list, was an annotated, ranked chart and listening guide that looked at landmark albums that changed jazz, changed lives, and brought the life-affirming music kicking and screaming into the mid-2000s. And so this album may not have been there for the music, but is definitely a jazz music album that changed the way we look at jazz. So all of that to be said, that I think that was crucial for your opinion on that. Because it is not, for new listeners, Afric Pepperbird is not the sound that you'll later hear in ECM, and it's not an easy album for anybody to appreciate.
And so I did dive into 5 or 6 other of his albums, and I'm thinking, why couldn't one of them be on there? There's some marvelous, very musically very talented and refreshing music, and I'm thinking,
well, that's why I highlighted that on the slideshow section, where he moved from his avant-garde stage to the more soothing sound that he's got in his later years.
Yeah.
And I told you last week, to definitely check out some of the later albums because you get almost a true picture of what he can do as opposed to what he's done on the first 3 or 4 or 5 albums that he did.
Yeah.
I'm super glad that you listened. Do you have a list of the albums that you checked out?
Oh man, yeah. I listened to In Praise of Dreams, which
Yes.
wow, I hope that our listeners go to that. I listened to Rights, and it's again calming and refreshing. The 12 Moons.
Oh,
Oh, gee.
yeah. From 1993 release, 12
Yeah.
Moons.
Places. I listened to that album. Wayfarer, and The Visible World, and every one of these. And I watched videos of these pieces, and he's a person of the world. He's a person of the environment. He's a person of and aware of what's happening around him. The colors, the flow of the water, the ocean waves, the ruins that he must have visited to see some of the places and the videos that he has. Blew my mind.
So would you recommend Afric Pepperbird to the first-time jazz listener? If you were talking to one of your friends and they say, give me an album to listen to? No, probably not.
I couldn't do that.
Would you recommend one of the other albums that you just listed?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
And I think I would go In Praise of Dreams and have him watch the video.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could go to sleep,
Yeah.
It's not like it's sleeping music. It's
No.
jazz, but it's a calming, refreshing kind of look at the world, really, and the dreams that we can have because of the music that gets into your heart and soul.
Yeah.
Matt, what about you?
Yeah, let me answer my own question. I would not recommend Afric Pepperbird to the first-time jazz listener as, hey, you got to listen to this. Homage, Eberhard Weber, though, I would highly recommend that over Afric Pepperbird. But 12 Moons from 1993 and then the 1976 Belonging album, any of those three to the first-time listener, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? First time
No.
listener? No.
Stars. I had Star on there. Of course, Dad went through all of them that I had on my list. From Europe with Love, Remember Me, My Dear, In Praise of Dreams, Rights, 12 Moons, Star, and then the other one was Wayfarer. But I also listened to Tig Vigdis from 1967, his first album.
First album, yeah.
Wow. So a host of other great music, but this album, no. Now I know for some of y'all into free jazz and avant-garde, you would tell people to absolutely 100% go to it. And I'm with you. If this is your style, if you've got friends that like this kind of music, then by every means, I'm not putting that down.
Mm-mm.
I've learned that from the comment about Peter Brotzman. I've got to be open-minded into what is jazz music, even if I don't like it. And if I don't like it, maybe you listen to my episode of why, because I think it's important. But no, for a first-time listener, I want to break in with any other Jan Garbarek album.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, a side comment: does it not blow your mind the number of artists and the number of albums? Well, we would, in your lifetime, you will never go through 100 of them, 100 artists and the albums that they got.
It's a rabbit hole, which is what I think we found. And Dad, you're finding this, and Mom's finding it. What is my style of music? Mm-hmm. And if we can take this broad perspective of jazz and whittle it down, and then you get your favorite sounds. You get your favorite bands. I'm stuck on Clark Terry. This week I've done some more Hargrove. Chet Baker is now in my ears a lot more. And all these trumpet players, Carl Allen and everybody he's played with. I've got all these sounds. You start to hear Wayne Shorter and Coltrane. And then you go, okay, but wait a minute. Will I shut out thousands of other musicians? Will I shut out the Jan Garbarek album Will I shut off EST because it's too calming? Will I shut off? Will I shut off?
Never will I shut
EST.
No, never.
But the idea is you've got to get a collection of the styles, and after 100 albums from Matt and I mean, Finding Gabriel.
Yeah.
Would we have ever found it without listening to The Art of the Trio by Brad Mehldau?
7 Days of Falling.
7 Days of Falling, EST, or Jacob's Ladder. I mean,
that's why we started this journey in the first place, because we were stuck in a rut.
yeah.
We were stuck listening to what we had to listen to, and we didn't expand. And now that we are expanding, we realize besides some of my favorite rut music, I'll always listen to them and I'll always enjoy them. But man, I've got a whole nother category of music to listen to and get kind of stuck in my rut. And I'll be honest, when I can't think of anything to play, I will tell Miss A over here to put on EST.
Yeah.
And not that it's because it's rut, but because I found that I can really enjoy and just engulf the music, and it never gets boring for me. Mm-hmm. Now, Jan Garbarek, some of his later work is going to start becoming more and more repetitious in my ear as well after this week. So, all right, Dad, did it shake your world?
Well, no.
Okay.
No, it did not shake my world. I was
even after the discussion tonight about ECM and not necessarily Jan. No, still no.
No.
I'm going to let him soak on it for a year, just like we did.
Yeah,
we can go back to it in a year and say, "Hey, what'd you think?" If you went back to it,
I will say, after listening to it several times, it wasn't didn't reverberate in my head. It didn't cause any dissonance, tremendous dissonance with the way I'm thinking and processing. But no, I likely will not go back to it.
Matt, did it shake yours?
A year ago, the album did not, but the realization about ECM did. So after our discussion, like I said, my score skyrocketed. If I was just rating the album and the artist, it would have been much, much lower on our rating. But because you and I can discuss it personally, and then my score changes because you open my eyes to the real reason.
And I think it's
much like Jan Johansson, his week opened our eyes as well.
But the idea of ECM, Manfred Eicher traveling to record these albums, thinking about where the sound, the history, it shook me from that reason. I still didn't care for the free jazz, and it's still gonna haunt me on that. Our scores reflected this week a little bit different number because of ECM. And I was going to say this to Dad, because we did dialogue about this, just like we are right now, we will have this dialogue, and it may shape the number. It may give us a point up, it may give us a point down, but for that reason, it is the dialogue and the discussion that helps us better put it together.
Okay, Dad, are you ready to rate? Because I'm really excited to hear your score.
I am. I looked at several areas, creativity being one.
Nice.
The history, the style, the feel, and I came up with a composite score of 7.5.
Okay. That's actually a point higher than I would guess from you.
Yeah.
And I gave the creativity basically a 10. Okay, because it's so creative. Just the track blurb. It's like, how does somebody come up with that? And it attracts you. It pulls you in. Is this real? Of course, I can picture a big old glob of something dropping into a pool of something, and the drum beat. It's captivating. So for that reason, I gave the creativity a 10.
Nice.
Okay.
But overall
6.5. 7.5. Yeah.
7.5. That's a good score from an unconnoisseur. After our discussion about ECM, the label still wouldn't kick it up even.
Yeah, I would. I
Okay.
would.
All right. That's fine.
I would give the history at least another point because the history was like because it's Norwegian, and
Mhm.
I'm not sure if I've listened to Norwegian music before. I gave an 8, so
Okay.
average.
Okay.
But ECM, I would have bumped it up. Yeah,
All right. Drew, what about you? What was your score?
The week we did this, I gave this a 7.5.
Okay.
I think that's what I just read on my sheet.
Okay. Well,
You're looking
hey, well, no, you can always head over to the unconnoisseur.com, our website, and check out all of our scores up to this point. So if you got any question about how we scored things, yep, just head right over to the unconnoisseur.com. 7.5 is a
7.5 from me. And Matt, what about you?
I gave this album, after our discussion, I gave it an 8. It met all the criteria for me, the craftsmanship, like Dad alluded to, the awareness, the creativity. The creativity was definitely there. The spirit and the emotion. They kind of all resonated with me, so I landed on an 8. This album did not pierce my soul, but homage to Edward Eberhard Weber, that pierced my soul. So solid 8 for me.
All right.
Good.
Now, Matt, please.
Really? We're going to talk next week. Next week, we are going to talk about another ECM artist who happens to be my favorite jazz artist of all time. Yes, I've been listening to Pat for over 30 years. So, a relation, I would say a relationship, but
You
I
don't know
really-
him.
I don't know him, but I don't care because
I've
I
had a
feel
relationship with his music for
I
30
feel
years.
like I know him just as much music as I listen to.
he might know you after that album comes out. That you
That's
have
right.
said
I'll,
it.
I'll send it to him. Say, hey, if you ever need a trumpet player, here's my work.
So what is the album?
Sorry, the album is number 31 on our countdown, and again, we are counting down from the 100 down to number 1. Number 31, Pat Metheny. The album is 8081. Again, it was released on the ECM label in 1980, as the name would say. Pat Metheny is on the guitar. We got Charlie Hayden on the bass, Jack DeJohnette on the drums, Dewey Redmond, and Michael Brecker are also on this album on the tenor sax. So we get Brecker and Redmond on the tenor sax, and my man Pat Metheny on the guitar.
Yep.
So put that in your ear, 8081. And if you have any other Pat Metheny that you would listen to, man, feel free to drop that in the comments too and let us know what you like about Pat Metheny.
So all of them.
It's going to be tough. Next week discussion will be tough to stay on 8081 for me. Let's just put it that way.
I'm looking forward to finding out his discog. Basically, how many albums over 30-year span of time?
Oh,
I can't imagine.
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That is one, that you could rabbit hole again down for a decade and still not probably listen to everything that he's done.
And I am sure that we will also dialogue a little bit about where his true sound started and came from based off his mentor.
Yes, absolutely we will.
Good.
All right.
All right.
Well, from all of us to all of you, thank you for joining us. As always, you can find us on the website, first place go to. Thanks for joining us on Spotify, Amazon, and iTunes
Yep.
for the podcast. And keep checking us out. Like, subscribe, and follow. Hit that bell right to the next to subscribe so you get notified every Wednesday morning when our videos come out.
Oh, hey, we reached a milestone this week, and I know it's not a huge number, but for me, it was a milestone. We have over 200 subscribers to our channel.
Yes.
So thank you very much for subscribing. We've got over 27,000 views. I'm so happy and so proud that you're along our journey with us. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Cheers, everybody.
Good night, y'all.